This is Master Turtle, and today we're talking about some more comics. Now, for those that don't know, I love collecting comic books. And just to give you a little bit of history, I started collecting comic books in 2014 when they rebooted the entire Ninja Turtle series. So I really wanted to pick up all the comics that were being reprinted, re-released, and then also I was really excited for all these different series. I do have some DC and some Marvel, which I'll probably share in a different video. However, today I want to talk about the topic of, if you buy all these different comic books, how do you protect them? What do you do? So I'm just going to share a little bit of my process, and then what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about comic book history, at least what I know, and why I collect. Okay, so let's start off with the protection bit. Now, always make sure you're buying the right size. Now, if you're buying modern day comics, there are what you call current size bags. So this is the Ultra Pro current size bags. You can see the size there. This is actually what I would call a very snug fit. You'll also want to buy a board. So these are basically acid-free cardboard and acid-free plastic bags. And what you do is you take your comic. For example, I have my Ninja Turtles Urban Legends, issue 22. I will get one of the boards. Then there's actually two sides to it. Now, I'm not really sure if this actually does anything. However, I like to have the smooth side touching the back of the comic book. So I like to keep those together. And then what I do is I grab one of the bags. And then in terms of the flap goes in the back, of course. And then you basically slip that in. Oh. And for this one, just note that there's not a lot of wiggle room for the board, so it actually goes in fairly snug. And the entire purpose of this is to give the comic book a little bit of a backing. So for those that keep their comic books in one of those large cardboard boxes, they can actually stand. There's a little bit of rigidity in between each of the comic books so that they can stand a little bit better. Now, if you actually did it without the board, it would be floppy, and you'd actually risk bending it, or you'd risk having the comic books leaning on each other, having some sort of like wrinkle in them. So that's why they do it. Now, this is for most of my comics. I use the Ultra Pro because the Ultra Pro is one of the cheaper options. For those comics where you feel like, oh, I want to make sure that they're in really good condition, they're one of my favorites. I use the My Lights 2, so I'll show you guys this. The My Lights 2 is actually really nice. It has more of a very smooth, you can kind of see how it's a little bit shiny. And it says a whole bunch of things. It can protect from humidity, volatile poly bag breakdown, acid migration, oxygen decomposition, insects, ultraviolet fading, mold and mildew, oils and gases. Thanks to the Mylar, the strongest plastic available with 1/3 the strength of steel. Mylar is also the most stable plastic with zero off-gassing. It does not absorb moisture like poly bags, and it is 100 more times resistant to the diffusion of oxygen. Use the material specified by the National Archives, the Library of Congress, and preservation experts around the world. So obviously these ones are much more expensive. So for, how many is this? 50 of them, it's $20 Canadian. So these ones are for my main series. So I mainly collect the IDW TMNT series. So all of them go into these Mylars. And actually these Mylars are a little bit, there's a little bit of room there. So what I'll do is I'll show you the next comic. So this is the IDW 103. So this is my main collection is this series. So I make sure to put these ones in first. So that goes in there. So I just wanted to show you without the board. It does give you a little bit of room on both sides. So it's actually a lot easier to put in. And then what I do is I also add the board. There you go. And you see even the board has a little bit of room. So this is actually really nice. I think it keeps the comics in better shape. Now, based on, how archiving works, I'm not sure if this is really necessary, especially for current comic books. However, I do like the shininess. Like, if you put this up on display versus this one, you can see which one shows up a lot better, right? And it's just a matter of preference. If you don't want to spend a lot of money per comic, I'd say these are just fine. And I use the Ultra Pro comic book boards regardless. I don't buy different comic book boards, and they come in packs of 100. And then, however, for those that, maybe you'll have a special one that you want to display, these ones are very nice if you like the shininess of it. And especially for those that want to make sure that they're reading on track, I'll show you guys. But basically, if I haven't read it, I keep the tab up, and then once I've read it, I actually seal it. And all I do is I just take some normal tape, and I just either, if you're feeling like really fancy, you fold it and you tape both sides. If you really don't care, you just want to seal it, just seal one side, because for the most part, if you plan to reopen them and read them, having two pieces of tape is not as good as one piece of tape in terms of just like opening it. However, for those that also collect the trade papers meaning they're the soft cover book version of the comics, and usually they release them in kind of 4 issues of trade paperback. So I always go back to those if I want to reread comics that I've already read, but I try to read these at least once because I want to get the enjoyment of reading them with the comic book. And let me say it like this: for comic books, the way that they're bound, it's actually a lot easier to see all the art, right, when you open it. However, in a trade paper, it does lose a little bit when they combine the spine, depending on the spine. So that's a pro tip. I don't really mind. However, I do enjoy basically opening the comic book and then flipping it one page at a time, being able to see all of the art. That for me is enjoyment right there. The different format, different way of opening it and reading it, a different feel. And a comic book, you read one, you stop, or having a book, you need a bookmark, you need to do all the fancy stuff of reading books. I don't necessarily want to do that. Sometimes I do like enjoying the read of a comic book. It's like reading a magazine. You sit down, you open one, and you read it. And that is how I bag and board my books. I'll show you guys a little bit more of the process later. I have actually a ton of comics that I have to read during this time of quarantine because I'm, like, for the IDW comic series, I'm at least 54 issues behind. It's been a very, very long time since I picked up a comic book and read it. And just a little bit of history in terms of comic books that at least I know from watching different YouTubers and also listening to a lot of the comic book histories. For those that collect current comic books, let me be very honest, I don't think it's going to be worth a lot of money. Maybe if you have a complete set of something and it's really well preserved. However, it's really just a lottery, right? Some people want to find, which one is going to be the one that's worth $10,000. I don't think that's a really good strategy because there's so many comics out there. It's hard to say. And truly and really, if you enjoy reading comics, get them. If you enjoy just collecting things or selling things, you can buy comic books, but you can't rely on the fact that one day these will be worth a lot of money. Yeah, but I want to make sure that for those that get into this hobby, don't depend on that, right? Make sure you have alternatives and make sure that you're spending within your means. Don't spend a fortune on comic books if you can't afford it, but if you can spend a couple dollars a month and it's something that you enjoy, I think that's what I do. Regardless of how much these are worth, I just enjoy comics. So I want to support the comic book industry. I want to make sure that the artists are paid for their work, and I think supporting these comic books is the way to do it. So for those that love comic books, I encourage you, once distribution is back up, I hope, please support your local comic shops. And for those that love comics, keep buying them because they keep creating these amazing stories, and I don't want that to end, right? I don't want to be the one that says, there's no enjoyment in reading physical media. There is. Having digital media, having everything on the tablets or online on your computer, that's a way of storage, but I don't think there's the same kind of passion. So please support physical media. I'll be talking more about the different physical media that I collect. I don't only collect comic books, I also collect movies, video games, and I want to share that experience with you. So this is Master Turtle, hoping everyone is staying safe, and please like, comment, subscribe. If you have a series of comics or something that you collect, please let me know down in the description below. Okay, thank you guys. Take care.